Hello and welcome. I'm Aikari, and this is the opposition to Pasig River Expressway by the numbers. Well, today we are with Ira Cruz of Alt Mobility. Hello, Ira.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Hi, Ira. So,
Hello.
Ira used to be with Pasig City Transport. He is also with with the Action for Economic Reforms right now.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, okay. So before we start, or before we delve into the topic, no, can you just tell us why is Alt Mobility opposing Pasig River Expressway or PAREX for short?
Right. ICA Out Mobility has been advocating for better transport policies for the last 2 years. That's before and during a pandemic, and several other groups way before us. And the answer will not change. In order for us to decongest our roads, or yung tinatawag natin para mawala yung traffic, we need to provide infrastructure that will allow people to take other forms of transportation, yung public transportation, biking, walking, and other forms of personal mobility. And for decades, and for as long as I can recall, we've been building roads, nagro-road widen tayo, nagtatayo tayo ng flyovers, and yet here we are, we're still stuck on the road. And that's precisely what PAREX will do. Take us on another journey of induced demand, yung tinatawag natin induced demand. Ano ba yung induced demand? Ito yung phenomenon na habang tinataasan mo yung supply ng ilang bagay, for instance, roads, para sa mga kotse, lalong tumataas yung demand para dito. So while we might see some easing of traffic or congestion at the beginning, hahabol din yung demand. Demand will eventually catch up, and we're just back to where we are. And unfortunately, we fear that it's not the only potential effect of PAREX. It will most likely have environmental repercussions, aggravate health issues, put in danger important heritage, historical, cultural properties along the river. Yung mga tinatawag na important built heritage along the river will be put in danger. Yung Manila Post Office, in the entire Intramuros, Escolta, Malacanang. And so we are, together with a whole bunch of other groups and individuals, are calling the government to cancel the supplemental toll operation agreement and say no to PAREX.
Okay, so Ira, even before the supplemental toll operations agreement was signed, Alt Mobility and other mobility groups actually have been voicing out your concerns against this. What do you think happened in between? Did the DOTR or the DPWH listen to you, to your concerns?
Well, it's quite easy to understand what happened, and what they and how they addressed our concerns by now. Having seen that the STOA has been signed last week, or earlier this week. I'm sorry. We have sent several communications to the Toll Regulatory Board, asking and sharing our position and asking for them to reconsider the STOA. It is not just Out Mobility. The Move as One Coalition has also sent letters. Greenpeace Philippines has also sent a letter. Renacimiento Manila has also sent letters. And we've all received replies that are pretty much a non-reply, to be honest. And
How?
then
How is it a non-reply?
being passed on to another agency, for more details, lack of information about the progress or at what stage it is already at this point. We also wanted to be able to have a discussion with San Miguel Corporation. We reached out to them. We sent them letters as well so we can have a discussion. We never received a reply from them. And so we have tried before the STOA has been signed, and yet it was signed before any extensive discussion was done.
Okay. So another thing that San Miguel Corporation is saying that this project is sustainable and green. That's what they're saying. And included in the plan is some 2 billion pesos worth of cleanup initiative for the Pasig River. How would you respond to that?
Well, first of all, how can planting massive columns for a 19-kilometer, 6-lane expressway on the riverbed support Pasig River? Uh, how is that in any way a step towards cleaning it up and reviving it? Second, a bus rapid transit, or BRT, as we are all familiar with it. It's a bus-based transit through dedicated lanes, typically located at the center of a road. If you think about it, how will pedestrians get on and get off the expressway and cross a highway? So imagine a 6-lane highway. You've got a BRT in the middle. Tapos you're in an elevated structure over the river. That's not much of a commuter experience. I mean, the carousel that we see on EDSA as it is very difficult for pedestrians. They would have to go up uh, an overhead walkway to make it, just to make its way down on the other side of the road, just to be able to ride the EDSA carousel. So it's not taking into consideration the actual experience, or how possible is it really, how feasible is it really for a pedestrian to ride the BRT, much less walk on Parex, or bike on Parex. But let's not get dragged down this rabbit hole. It is not the kind of infrastructure that will promote better mobility in our cities. This just brings us back to the principle that I've described earlier, the principle of induced demand. Again, it might ease traffic at the beginning, but demand will eventually catch up. So San Miguel Corporation, we also need to point out, will pay for the construction today at a whopping 95 billion. But how much will it cost us in the future to take it down when we realize that we've made such a massive mistake? This type of infrastructure is old, and this is not the future, and most certainly not the future that we want.
I saw before. So if say as a transport reporter, of course, I keep looking for examples of how transportation or the infrastructure seen at least here in the Philippines can get better, no? So I saw other experiences in other countries, such as, like, for example, Netherlands, I mean, for bikes. And then in Korea, actually, interestingly, they have a really long elevated walk path. That's one of the things that people actually go to, no, diba? Diba? When you go to Han River, you can easily just bike around. And in one instance, actually, I read that Korea actually demolished one of its expressways. So, would you say that building more roads or more expressways is actually outdated in that sense, given that more developed countries are actually demolishing them? Or what can the Philippines learn from these examples?
Yeah, Aika, they say hindsight is 2020. And you see, we don't even need the benefit of hindsight. There it is, right in front of us. The question that we should be asking is, do we need to make the same mistakes in order to learn it? Unfortunately, we shouldn't, because it's going to cost us not just money, but environment, our health, heritage cultural sites that could never ever be restored. Roads are supposed to connect people. That's why it's built. But infrastructure like this will only benefit vehicles. The remaining 88% of households don't own cars. And so we're spending 95 billion, risking the environment, our health, our heritage, our culture, just to benefit the 20%. And we've seen quite clearly how in more advanced countries such as Korea, they're tearing these things down. And we can see right now how this has benefited the population of Korea so much, not just in promoting biking and walking, but also being able to make them enjoy their city. And in so doing, also promote their own tourism.
So what would you say? Because some people would actually say that, oh, building, I mean, at least even in this administration, build talaga yung priority. So parang what do you make of that? Kasi yun yung sinasabi nila na that would bring jobs back in the middle of the pandemic.
Um, yes, it will bring jobs, but it's very temporary. It's only while the infrastructure is being built. But what happens after that? We need to look for more sustainable solutions. Build was supposed to help transport people and make it possible for people to enjoy their cities and tap into the vast opportunities that cities offer. Yet it still caters to the minority of people. Again, 20%, around 20% of roads are occupied by, sorry, only 20% of people own roads. And so these infrastructure that build is putting forward will really just benefit the very minority. And it shuts out the 80 to 88% that don't have cars. We need to look for sustainable ways to move people around the city. So it's really about prioritizing how to move people and not cars.
Okay. So, Ira, you are a transport planner. What do you think should the government and the private sector work on instead? I mean, we've seen in some in some countries as well, closing off roads, 'di ba? I mean,
Yeah,
even in the US, 'di ba? In New York, kita natin yan sa Times Square, they actually closed off portions of that para lang to accommodate more pedestrians, 'di ba? And to
yeah.
in a way buhayin yung mga yung mga establishments, at least yung mga small establishments around that area, no? So ano ba yung dapat na gawin ng private sector? What do you think as a transport planner?
Well, you see, first of all, the government is not in the business of looking out for the welfare of businesses. No, it's not supposed to be in the business of helping businesses make money, but the government should create while the government should build an environment where businesses will thrive, but it should not be its primary goal. At least it shouldn't be. Um, and I would like to also reiterate, there is nothing wrong with driving a car. The recurring issue is that infrastructure being prioritized by government just increases the dependency on it. So when you think of truly improving mobility for everyone in the city, pandemic or no pandemic, the government, the business sector, the private sector, everyone should focus in its efforts in providing the basic needs. You're looking at build, just really big ticket projects, flyovers, expressways, trains, but we fail to provide the very basic needs. I mean, it's okay to build, rapid trains, but we should also take time to to provide the basic needs of everybody. Every journey begins with walking, regardless of what mode of transport you're in. So we need to have proper sidewalks, that can support short distance travels. We need to be able to provide safe and protected bike lanes, for the thousands that already rely on biking as a primary means of transportation, and to encourage more people to consider it. Improving the state of public transportation. I can remember it was already bad before the pandemic. And during the pandemic, with the reduction in its capacity, not only is it extremely lacking, drivers and other transport workers are now needing help from the government. And so think about it. Where can the 95 billion pesos be of? Where can we spend it that will have a larger mileage that would benefit more people? And so those are the kind of things that I feel that the government, together with the private sector, can work together. In the case of Pasig, very recently, they opened the Capitolio intersection. That was a collaboration between Pasig Transport and Ortigas Land. It's a solution that brings forward human-centered infrastructure. It opens up at-grade crossings for pedestrians, differently abled, senior citizens, young and old, to be able to cross conveniently. It introduces infrastructure that supports biking, and it also opens an intersection that brings traffic to a commercial establishment. So there are plenty of things that the private sector can collaborate with the government that benefits everybody and not just the 20%.
Okay. So since we're already on the topic now, in the 2022 budget, I don't
Yeah.
see any amount for active transport. This was also brought up by House Transportation Chairperson Sarmiento, saying that at least 3 billion should be included for service contracting, and whatever amount requested for active transport should be included. So given that, since we're still in the middle of budget deliberations, what should congressmen, what should lawmakers prioritize in terms of funding those projects? Since we know that allocations actually they have to carve it out from other line items.
Yep. That's true. You've got to carve it out from other items, and it shouldn't be it shouldn't be a problem. Uh, for as long as they are really focusing on projects that matter and make a difference in the lives of the majority. And if it does, why should it be a huge issue to carve it out of other projects? And really all they need to do is look out their windows, get a glimpse of how everyone else is finding their way. Ordinary commuters, people going to the market, people coming to work, health workers, essential workers, they don't ride cars. They slug it out every day, just the rest of us, on very limited public transportation. They risk their lives, we risk our lives biking. They walk in what is practically an obstacle course. And then so those things are projects, policies that matter and really make a difference in the lives of so many people. And you have 95 billion to spend for 20%. And to be honest, it might even cost much less to provide the necessary infrastructure for the remaining 80% that to this date is suffering, pandemic or no pandemic, from the current state of mobility in the country.
Ira, I'm actually interested. How would you evaluate this administration's active transport or commuter policies? Kasi nakita natin in the Bayanihan 2, in the 2021 budget, they have budget for service contracting. And this would actually benefit not only the drivers, but also yung mga commuters din. So, but then we saw a lot of challenges. So how would you evaluate what they did so far?
Well, they're seriously lacking in. Well, okay. While I'm saying that, we do recognize that the DOTR, in partnership with DPWH, has started introducing bike lanes, and we'd like to recognize that they have done that, but not at the pace at which we should be moving. A lot of these projects are moving forward much faster than a lot of these basic needs that quite honestly will benefit more. I mean, take a look at the time frame at which the STOA was signed, and the time frame and the time frame by which infrastructure such as bike lanes are being implemented. And even then, it's still a discussion of whether it's painted or should it be protected. And obviously, it has to be protected because paint just doesn't quite cut it. And so, if I have to rate them, they are still quite stuck in working towards benefiting the 20% of the population. They need to really evaluate their objectives and then really convince themselves that they need to work harder to be able to make a difference in the lives of everybody. You're right. There was budget, but was it spent is the question. And yet
Right.
a lot of our street remain to be unprotected. There are no bike lanes. We have yet to introduce service contracting. And yet we're seeing long lines of people trying to line up during the pandemic to try to fit in very limited public transportation. And that's not just a problem when it comes to transportation. That's also a health issue. people are trying to squeeze in very limited public transportation to be able to go home, and you really can't blame them. There is no public transport available, and even if they want to shift to biking, perhaps a good number of them are afraid for their lives because there's no
Right,
proper
correct.
protected infrastructure that we can even call a network.
I agree. I agree. Actually, if you talk to yung mga nanay or tatay, di ba? Some of them would actually prohibit their children to wag na kayong magbike kasi parang buwis buhay yan eh, di ba? So, what do you think should, kasi hindi lang naman yan national government, there's also the local governments, at least here in Metro Manila, no, we saw Pasig City, for example,
Yeah.
building their own protective bike lanes. It was here, even before bike lanes became a topic, di ba, for COVID-19. So it was there na, at least. And they even expanded it to have bike boxes. Sabi mo nga, di ba, the paint just doesn't cut it. But kita mo naman, some people actually, when you pass by Capitolio or sa may along Shaw, di ba, parang nalilito pa sila. Ano bang ibig sabihin ito? So, what do you think should the local government do, no? Kasi given that they have bigger share also of national taxes because of the Mandanas ruling.
Okay. Well, first of all, if there's anything that everybody should take away from what Pasig Transport did is that it can be done. This is for us transport planners. We read a whole bunch of guidebooks. We see best practices all over the world, and this is a page out of an international guidebook, and it's really thrilling to see it come to life and see how it can adjust to the demands of the local population. And the response has been overwhelming, and it just goes to show that investing in human-centered infrastructure is the future. It is a demonstration of how a city, through a champion internally in Pasig Transport, can work with the private sector, a business, in coming up with a solution that serves the majority, and at the same time also benefits the cars as well. And so it's very doable, and there is so much opportunity for the local government units to take the lead in designing our cities. You've said it yourself. Even before the pandemic, Pasig Transport has already been working towards introducing bike lanes, introducing better policies to encourage people to bike. And so it can be done. It does take time. It does take a lot of political will, but it can be done. And it pays to have a champion inside the government. It pays to have an advocacy group such as Mobility, but it also pays to have the private sector understanding their role in city building and how they can contribute to making the city where they operate much better. We've been working with several local government units by giving them, Mobility together with Move as One Coalition. We've been working with several local government units since last year, giving them capacity development workshops so that they can develop their own pedestrian and biking infrastructure. And we're currently working with the Department of Health and developing modules to reach more LGUs and build their capacity. The Move as One Coalition, of which Mobility is a part of, continues to work with NAGA. We also co-developed with DOH. This provides LGU guidelines, not just for pedestrian and bike-friendly designs, but also touches on the importance of open space, through pedestrian-only streets and a lot more in an active transport handbook. And we've even started a group with other transport officials from cities in Metro Manila all the way to Davao, an avenue to share wins, however small, share best practices, and just all around support each other in whatever it is that they would like to do in their cities. And so while the national government sets the tone and it takes care of a lot of these regional projects, the local government units, you're right, has a very huge role in leading that discussion. And we've seen how Pasig started it, and now it's being adopted in a lot of places. And then a lot of cities have also come up with their own way of interpreting these international best standards that best adapts to their population. So work from everybody is working together with everyone is definitely what we need in order to have better cities that are human centered and not just benefiting the minority or the 20% of people that choose to ride cars as a mode of
Okay.
transport.
Let's go long term. Ira, I'm actually curious. Since you also have experience no working with local government. So long term, right now, merong pending sa Congress no, yung ang Magna Carta for commuters, 'di ba? Na bill. And then we also see yung local governments naman, they should also have their own comprehensive land use planning, 'di ba? And part of the
Yes.
CLUP is yung transport planning. So,
Yes.
ano yung masasabi mo doon? Like, given na ito yung sa Congress, sa national, and then yung mga CLUP ng local.
Right. Well, first of all, we continue to call on both houses of Congress to pass the Commuter Bill of Rights or the Magna Carta of Commuters. This is very important. This is a very important piece of legislation because it, for the first time, puts the welfare of ordinary commuters front and center. It specifies things like there needs to be a decent sized sidewalk for pedestrians. There needs to be infrastructure for persons with disability. There needs to be a network of safe and protected bike lanes. It also introduces much needed reform in public transportation so that public transportation can become a viable choice of transport. There is nothing wrong with cars, as I mentioned, but what's wrong with it is that the moves of government by creating all this infrastructure makes car dependency very high. You have no other choice but to ride a car.
Right.
And so what this bill does, so when you build highways, when you build expressways, when you build new roads, when you road widen, when you demolish sidewalks, when you build expressways over rivers, what that tells people is that ride a car. Why bother, and it's very unsafe to ride a bike. And you see, we have very limited city space. And so we cannot possibly build roads everywhere. There's going to be nothing left of our cities but roads. And as it is, 40 to 50%, I think, is already roads. So we've given up half of our city space for cars. And it's not the way we want to enjoy our cities. And so the national government needs to lead that conversation by passing this bill so that it becomes mandatory to provide all of these other options so that we can decongest our roads, solve traffic, as we say it, by giving people alternatives to get around the city and not be stuck in traffic. For local government units, we've seen it done in Pasig Transport. And I'm sorry for the other local government units that I consistently highlight Pasig Transport only because I used to work there. But there are a lot of other local governments that have also built their own bike offices. All the way from in Metro Manila, we have San Juan, we have the Gig, we have Quezon City that have built their own bike offices, Valenzuela even, all the way down to Davao, in Naga, Cagayan de Oro, Cebu. And little by little, these local government units are starting a spark of introducing all of these infrastructure, and we've seen it as Outmobility. We've taken them through several workshops, and we've seen the fruits of these workshops. They've shown us photos of how they've also introduced bike boxes in their own areas, how they've introduced bike lanes, how they've designed their own take on all of these infrastructure to adjust to what works for them. And so local government units are also placed at a very, very important role because one, they can do it fast, they can do it right away. And number two, they understand the needs of their people so much better than the national government or regional governments.
Okay. So we have a question here, and I will read it. So wait lang. Okay. So this is from Marty Villegas. Hi, I am against the construction of barracks. How can citizens more effectively voice out their concerns on these infrastructure projects? And I guess just to add, how can citizens actually lobby, against the project if they're interested?
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for, first of all, thank you so much for your support. We need every bit of it. Number one, let the Toll Regulatory Board and all of its member agency know that you as citizens are against it. It's not too late. Let the president know that this is not something that we want to be a part of our future. Oppose them. Reach out to your local government units to deny local permit for the construction of 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 the PAREX. Reach out to the National Commission for Culture and the Arts. Ask NCCA to declare Pasig River a natural, a national cultural asset. Ask the NCCA to protect it. Call on the DENR to make sure that they don't issue an ECC to fulfill their mandate of protecting the environment, protecting the river. Join us at Alt Mobility and Move as One Coalition. We are undermanned for this massive battle versus a well-oiled, well-funded machine like San Miguel Corporation. We're no match to their size. And so we need everybody to make sure that the government hears you. Make Congress know, make representatives and House of Representatives, make the senators know that this is not something we want. Ask them to have a formal inquiry on the process being done by the TRB and how the STOA was approved. Make sure the national government knows that you're opposing it. Join us in Out Mobility PH in opposing this. Contribute anything you can. Make as much noise on social media. And together we should be able to fight this and get the future that we all want.
There's another question here, Ira, basically asking what's the role of NEDA in this project. I'm actually quite interested because it's TRB.K of the go signal, essentially.
Right. NEDA is a member of the Toll Regulatory Board, and it is the Toll Regulatory Board that decides on whether or not they will approve the supplemental toll operation agreement. And so we would also appeal to all the members. That's NEDA, Department of Transportation, Department of Public Works and Highways, the Department of Finance to reconsider their decision to allow barracks to be built.
We don't have a lot of time, but I want to ask you one last question. So we're feeling the election fever right now, no? With presidential contenders saying that they will run for the 2022 polls. So what do you think should would the presidential candidates push for or focus on in terms of the issue of transportation? Because I remember 6 years to, hindi lang naman to. We don't know when the pandemic will end, but if it will end during the next administration, we will return to what it was like, no, pre-pandemic.
You know, it's not just about who wins for president. It's every inch about who wins in every elected position that has the power to influence how our cities will be designed. Our vision for the future cannot possibly be limited to car transportation and how we can ride our cars. You know, we need to challenge, we need to demand a future that we can enjoy so that we can enjoy living in the city, a city that builds streets to connect people, not hamper nor divide them, and one that is built for everyone. And every elected official has a stake in making this happen for all of us. You know, cities are one of the best inventions in history, if you ask me, because its diversity, immense opportunities, energy contribute to the growth of an economy. And you know, really, let's not get stuck in traffic in it. Let's create ways to allow everyone to be able to tap it. So pick your future, challenge the incumbents to stick by what is important to you, and demand it from the people that are seeking your vote. And the elections is such a great opportunity for us to demonstrate that they work for our future and not the other way around.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ira. Again, I talked to Ira Cruz of Alt Mobility. I am Aika Ray. Thank you for watching.
Thanks, Aika.